in our society, we've kind of adopted that idea of it's not supposed to be hard because everybody is making it look so easy. So why does it feel so hard for me? And then you start thinking, I'm doing it wrong. I'm not meant to be a mom. There's something wrong with my baby because my baby is harder than this influencer's baby that I'm seeing online. And it just creates a snowball effect. You're not able to focus on what's happening with you and your actual baby because you've somehow convinced yourself that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. Or again, it's not living up to your expectations because you had unrealistic expectations because you didn't see a real postpartum on Instagram.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. This week's reviewer of the week is Anna Antonella, and she says, unmedicated birth in a hospital. I'm so happy I found this podcast. I was like 33 weeks pregnant when I found it, and it helped me so much. I learned a lot and lost the fear of giving birth. Honestly, if I could do that for anybody, that is like, oh, I am so happy. That makes me really, really happy. She says, I really appreciate that this podcast is not full of advertisements too. You're welcome. That's actually something I have not done for that reason. I bought the online course and got more knowledge and did the exercises and meditations. My birth experience. I went to the hospital in early labor and gave birth to my baby boy after 14 hours. I dilated perfectly without stalls and had no medical interventions. I trusted my body and that I'm built to give birth. Thank you so much for your podcast and online course. You taught me everything that I needed to know. Oh, Anna, this is so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you guys haven't left a review yet, go do that. That is how new moms find the podcast. But let's dive into today's episode. So with me, I have Caitlin Wilder, who is a mom of two and a full spectrum doula living in Los Angeles, who is on a one-woman mission to help moms reclaim their postpartum experience. Her Instagram is the place to share the realities of postpartum, including all the things that nobody talks about, encourage mom to ignore the quote shoulds, and live a DGAF, no rules allowed new mom life. When she's not with her two young kids, you can find her yapping away on her podcast, On We Go, or working on her merch line, the Bad Moms and Babies Club. So with that, Caitlin, will you say hello to everybody, kind of introduce yourself, anything I missed, and then let's dive into the podcast.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Didn't miss anything in that. Every time I hear a bio about myself, I'm like, this is so out of body. But no, that's basically me in a couple sentences. Super, like I said, super happy to be here and excited to talk with you and talk all about postpartum and all of that.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love what you do. I think we don't have enough of it. And so I'm excited for you to be here today and kind of share all of that with our listeners. Why don't we kind of dive in and start with what is a postpartum doula? Talk about that.
So basically, when people think of doulas, I think they really think of birth doulas, which I also am, which is amazing, which, provides support during pregnancy, labor, and delivery. I know you know all about doulas. So I started as a birth doula and I really loved it. And then I had my daughter last year and I really unexpectedly started sharing about my postpartum on Instagram. I think I was just lonely and I was just like, oh, I'm just going to talk into my camera on my phone and see what happens. And I got very obsessed with postpartum and the realities of postpartum and the fact that what we are being shown online of what postpartum is nothing like what most people's actual postpartum experience is. So I decided then I wanted to also become a postpartum doula. I don't really do in-person work at this point in time, but a postpartum doula there's people have different specialties, but so some people are postpartum doulas who cook really nourishing, healthy foods. They'll come to your house after you have a baby and cook for you. Other postpartum doulas are more focused on you. So it's, coming and making sure you're healing well, taking care of you. It's not to like come in and take care of the baby necessarily, but it's just to provide support, like maybe even do laundry or wash things, bottles if you're using bottles or pump parts. Just provide, that comfort, that almost that village that people used to have that so few people have now. And so that's really what postpartum doulas do. They share education, information, and I kind of took all of that and was like, okay, well, I'm just going to put it online.
Yeah, that's really neat. Tell me a little bit about how people come into contact with you and when, because I feel like oftentimes when moms find a postpartum doula, it's when they're drowning and somebody is like, have you heard of?
Yeah.
So for everybody listening today that maybe you're still pregnant, like I want them to know, when do you reach out to a postpartum doula? Is this someone you interview just like a regular doula?
Yeah.
And then like, how do you know how to find the right one and when they should come and all of that? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Absolutely. Those are great questions. And when I meet with clients as a birth doula, one of our final meetings is all about postpartum prep and about building your postpartum team and how important that is, because there are so many people that you should have on your postpartum team that you might not even think of, from pelvic floor therapists to lactation consultants to a postpartum doula. And you bring up such a great point that most people realize they need that help when they're already drowning in it. And so people in the world, though, expect that. It would be great to have that lined up before you have your baby. But postpartum doulas also understand that people might not even realize they need that until they really need it. So if you're pregnant and it's something that you think you want, absolutely reach out to people, interview. I always say, it's the same as when you're interviewing a birth doula. It's less about, how many families have you helped? How many years have you been doing this? And more about energy and who are you connecting with and who do you want in your home? It's the same thing with a birth doula. It's like, it doesn't matter if somebody's been at 1,500 births. Is this a person you want in the hospital room with you for 14 hours, sleeping on the floor, having the most epic sleepover of all time with you? Who are you going to feel comfortable and supported and safe with? And so that's really, for me, the most important thing that you should be looking for if you're wanting to work with a postpartum doula. And then seeing, like I mentioned, how kind of different postpartum doulas have different specialties. There also might be a postpartum doula who does body work or who maybe does more of what somebody might see as woo-woo, but like, a closing of the bones ceremony or all of those kinds of things. So many postpartum doulas have different specialties. And I think it's just figuring out what you think you might need. Like I said, some really focus on cooking nourishing food. You might think, oh my gosh, I have, maybe you have other kids and you won't be able to have time to make food for yourself or your family. A postpartum doula could come in and help cook for at least you. They'll make extra food. So I think it's important to kind of figure out what you think you might need, how it might fit best in your family. And then, if you have in your pregnancy time to look into that before you have your baby, that's great. But if you haven't, nobody's going to be like, sorry, it's too late. I'm not going to come work with you. You've already had your baby. Like, people will do what they can to help you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can we talk a little bit? Well, you mentioned that what we're seeing online is not typically what women are experiencing.
Yes.
So can you kind of talk about the two of those, what you see, and kind of normalize some of that for the people that are listening today?
Absolutely. I could talk about that for 600 hours because that is what I am most passionate about.
I love it.
And it's kind of on two sides of the coin. I feel like postpartum realities that are just not being shown online anywhere, and it's not meeting women where they are. So I feel like you'll either see, for the most part, two things. You'll either see somebody experiencing postpartum where they're doing all the Ayurvedic foods and they're staying in the bed for 10 days and then near the bed for 10 days. Or you'll see someone on the flip side who, is immediately like bounced back and acting like they never had a baby and done up and going out and all of that. And both of those things are beautiful if those are your experiences. But for the average mom, I think it's somewhere in the middle. Most people don't have the ability to stay in their bed for 10 days, especially if they have other kids. And most people aren't, able to do that whole bounce back thing or have a baby that's sleeping through the night from birth, which I do think people are all lying about. That is like my motto, is that everybody on Instagram is lying. But I think what the problem is that does such a disservice for new moms, because the reality of postpartum is, yes, it's beautiful, but it's also hard. And it being hard doesn't mean you're experiencing it incorrectly or it's not happening the way that it should. Hard does not equal bad. But for some reason in our society, we've kind of adopted that idea of it's not supposed to be hard because everybody is making it look so easy. So why does it feel so hard for me? And then you start thinking, I'm doing it wrong. I'm not meant to be a mom. There's something wrong with my baby because my baby is harder than this influencer's baby that I'm seeing online. And it just creates a snowball effect of then you're not paying, you're not able to focus on what's happening with you and your actual baby because you've somehow convinced yourself that there's a problem that needs to be fixed. Or again, it's not living up to your expectations because you had unrealistic expectations because you didn't see a real postpartum on Instagram. So my whole thing is like, let's talk about what it's actually like, which is, again, beautiful and difficult and, the best experience of your life and the worst experience of your life all wrapped up into one. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. You should never feel bad or guilty for having that experience. So that's really, I feel like I focus on kind of the emotional and mental side of what postpartum is like, kind of explaining those things. And then also even just the things that happen to us physically that no one talks about. I remember the first time I talked about sundown scaries, which is that feeling at like 4 p.m. when the sun starts going down and all of a sudden you're filled with anxiety or like homesickness, and it comes out of nowhere and it's every day at sundown. And I remember posting about that with my daughter because I remembered having it with my son. And the amount of comments I got from people saying, oh my God, I can't believe this is a thing that happens. I can't believe this happens to other people. I thought this only happened to me. I had no idea this was a common experience. My comment section like flooded with responses like that. So even things like that, I'm like, why are people not talking about this? Why are we not sharing about this? Because again, all of those people that thought it was just happening to them felt so isolated by it, didn't feel like they could talk to somebody about it because they thought, again, what's wrong with me for experiencing this because no one else is saying they're experiencing it too. So that is a very long-winded answer. That's why in my bio, I said I just yap away on my podcast when I'm not doing anything else, because it's just, to me, we're doing such a disservice to new moms and to ourselves by not sharing, again, the actual realistic versions of postpartum. So that is my one woman mission, is to share that and to give women permission to talk about those experiences, to vocalize that they're having those experiences, and to ignore and understand that all of those, perfect versions of postpartum you're seeing on Instagram or social media aren't true.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad that you said it's actually very normal for it to be hard, and hard doesn't mean bad.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the quote of the day because it's so true. And motherhood is hard. And you can read all the books, you can do all the prep, and there's nothing that's going to prepare you for it. And every child is different. So even in some ways with your second child, I'm sure you were like, oh my gosh, I've done this before and it was so hard last time and I've got this. You're going to have new challenges that are like, holy crap. Yeah, I didn't see that coming.
Absolutely.
It's just part of the process. It's part of the experience. But I think when we can, recognize that we go through things, and even if somebody else is going through something different, that it's okay, that we're all mothers and we can kind of love each other in this community.
Absolutely.
In that space. Yeah, that's I think that's how we walk through it, really well.
I think so too. And there's a lot of people also that will, make new moms feel like they're not grateful if they say something is hard. I've had a lot of conversations, especially with moms who have had IVF or who have had to, go through years of fertility complications, and then they have their baby and it's really hard. And they think, oh, well, I can't say it's hard because I worked so hard for this, or I'm so grateful and I don't want to seem ungrateful. And if I say I'm having a hard time or I don't love it as much as I thought I would, then people are going to think I'm ungrateful. And it's just so unfair that we do that to each other and we do it to ourselves. Like sometimes we are our own worst enemies too, that we won't let ourselves, say, oh, it feels hard, but I'm not a bad person for saying it feels hard. I'm just a person experiencing something that's difficult.
Yeah. Well, and I think even within the birth community, and maybe you can agree with this or not, but I've noticed, I've been in here for a good 15 years now, and I'm like, we have gone from really wanting to bring attention to postpartum issues, mood disorders, anxiety, and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like I've spent a lot of time talking about that to normalize that. And I've forgotten to kind of talk about what we're talking about right now so that moms can also feel normal instead of, oh, shoot, I probably have a postpartum mood disorder now. Now we've flopped it the other direction.
Totally.
Whereas it's okay for it to be hard. It's okay to have anxiety. It's okay to go through some, it's actually part of the normal process.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean you're broken. So
exactly. And I think too, it's a really it's gotten really black and white when I think so many of us just live in that middle gray where you're either seeing people who, again, have their baby and then they're like, oh, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Or you see people who have diagnosable PPD, PPA, which are beautiful stories that need to be shared. And I'm so glad they are. But then you're not seeing people in the middle who don't have a diagnosable mood disorder and are just, again, maybe struggling for a little bit or experiencing baby blues or just not loving it. And I think that's not what's being seen. Or people see that and think, oh, I do have, I need to go to a doctor, all of that. And it's like, you're just having normal experiences.
Yeah, you're just becoming a mother.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard and it's wonderful. And, again, it's supposed to be hard. And that doesn't make it less beautiful.
Yeah. Well, all the good things in life that are worth it, you go through hard times to get there, right? So
totally.
It's just one of them. Talking about postpartum, though, and this is kind of your specialty. So can we talk about some postpartum prep that can help moms to kind of move into this postpartum period smoothly?
Totally. So I mentioned before that when I'm working with a client as a birth doula, one of our sessions is always about postpartum. In terms of physical prep, this might be a hot, controversial take. I do not love padsicles. I'm not that into them. I, love people that love them. I'm not going to take them from you. That kind of stuff, I think that's what people focus on when they prep for postpartum is padsicles. Did I get the Frida box? Do I have the right, all of that? And I think what people really need to focus on is the mental aspect, the emotional aspect. That's not a checklist you're going to find for some, freebie that download. Yes, all of that stuff is great. But it really is, exposing yourself to what postpartum can be like. And I've had people come on my Instagram and say, oh, you're scaring me so much by telling me it's hard. And my response to that is, it shouldn't scare you because what makes things so hard is, again, not knowing that it's possible or thinking that it's wrong to have those experiences. So I love when I have people who haven't had a baby yet on my page that are like, oh, I started watching your videos when I was pregnant and then I felt the sundown scaries, but I knew what it was because I'd seen you talking about it. And so it didn't scare me as much, or I knew something wasn't wrong. I knew it would end one day because I saw you talking about that. So I think to me, a lot of things like that, people will say, well, why aren't people talking about it? And I think people are worried, it's a fine line of, how do I tell somebody who's pregnant, hey, you might be hard, but I'm not saying this to scare you. And I'm not saying this to instill fear in you. I'm just telling you because it's normal. And I don't want you to think, again, there's something wrong with you. Because I think that just compounds on it of when you've never seen somebody talk about it. You think there's something wrong. You think there's something wrong with your baby. So I think as much as you can, expose yourself to, I'm not trying to promote myself, but expose yourself to people who are talking about postpartum realities, I think is really important and helpful for people that maybe are prone to anxiety or depression. Before you have your baby, already find a therapist and have an appointment scheduled for 3 weeks after you plan on giving birth. Because you want somebody that you can check in with, especially again, if you're predisposed to that. You can do all of the house prep stuff, but my client that I have right now sent me over a list that somebody had sent her of like all of this postpartum prep and things needed and items. And I just was like, oh my God, this is like exhausting looking at. But I understand too, when I was pregnant, you know, it feels good to like think you're in control by like, oh, well, I got this one item that this one baby loved. So like my baby's not going to cry. And again, it's like, okay, well, we're focusing a little bit on the wrong thing here. Like you need to do more of the emotional, mental prep, you know, get a team in place, like we talked about, of a postpartum doula if you want that, or a pelvic floor therapist. I think an underrated thing that a lot of people stopped doing is a meal train. I love meal trains. And I'm not even talking about somebody actually like making you a casserole, which would be fantastic and fun, but they have websites now for meal trains where you can just log in, you know, send it to all of your friends and family, put it on your Instagram. People in this day and age, especially women of our age that were raised with the idea of like, you can do anything, like there's no glass ceiling, you can do whatever you want. We have a very hard time asking for help or acknowledging that we need help or assistance. And like I said, too many of us don't live near family or friends, or, you know, we don't really have a village. I think you have to somehow get yourself comfortable with the idea of asking for help, of acknowledging that you shouldn't be doing this on your own. So, you know, get a group together, make a meal train website and send it out to people. I think that is hugely helpful. Like I said, all of the items and things, this is a very controversial take, I know too, because people are obsessed with this, but somewhere on Instagram, the nursing cart lobby got very powerful. Like, you need to have a rolling cart filled with all of this stuff in your home that you drag from room to room. I mean, like, I can still see the nursing cart in the corner of my eye that I didn't use. And it's just like haunting me. So things like that you don't need. And I always say also, our children are like our greatest trolls. Somebody's going to tell you, you need this item. This is the absolute best. Your baby's going to love it. My baby slept for hours in it. And then you're going to show your baby and they're going to scream like you're torturing them. Like your baby, true. Yeah, your baby's going to guaranteed hate whatever somebody told you your baby was going to love. So that's why too, I'm like, don't even bother with, especially all these like super expensive. I mean, I got somebody gifted with my son that $400 Mamaroo swing that people swear by. And truly both of my children were like, get me out. This is a torture chamber. Like, what are you doing in here? I think max, I used it for 5 minutes total across 2 children. So, you know, like I said, I get it. And it feels nice to get these things and to feel like you're in control of the experience. But if you can focus your postpartum prep more on mental and emotional prep, I think that is the most helpful. I will also say too, a caveat of, you know, it's like with our partners are never going to understand what postpartum is like because for the most part, they haven't experienced it. And a pregnant person is never really going to understand what postpartum is like either. I could tell my clients all the time about sundown scaries or about DMARE, and they'll be like, okay, sure, like whatever. It's not going to make sense until you're actually in it. But my whole hope is that once you're in it, there's at least a piece of like, oh, okay, I remember hearing about this. So I know that this is a thing that happens and that is normal. So that's, you know, you're never going to be fully prepared. There's no such thing. Because also you'll never know what your baby is like. You have to realize too, your baby your baby is part of you, but your baby's an entirely unique person with unique wants and needs and opinions and concerns. And you can't know what they're going to like at all. So again, you can prep as much as you want, but you have to remember too, you're about to meet someone who is going to want their own things and like their own things or dislike their own things. So I think that's, to me, the most important postpartum prep you can do is really like the mental, emotional aspects of it, getting a team together.
You know, I actually think what you said is really important too. Just saying that this baby is somebody that we don't know yet, and we're going to have to learn some things. That's a good reminder, because if you as a mom have to learn and understand this baby. It's okay to not lean on everyone else's advice who is not with that baby and the mother of that baby if you yourself are working to understand, and to trust that when you do feel like something is right or wrong for your baby, that's your truth and you get to live that because you're that baby's mother. And it is really easy, I think, to allow other people's opinions, even social media, to come in and kind of like bleed into what we feel like we're not doing enough of or what we should be doing. That's really normal for us, I think, as moms, to just have like all this guilt of wanting to be the best mom ever and if we're doing enough. But even a well-meaning mother or mother-in-law, you know, they are not that baby's mother. And so I don't know. I think postpartum, as hard as it is, and having a community nearby, sometimes that community is not exactly what you need it to be, or it is really great and they might offer great suggestions that do work, but ultimately we're in charge of that little life and the decisions that we make for it. We are the ones that live with the consequences of that, be it good, bad, or whatever. So I mean, that was such a good point to like, yes, we're still getting to know this little human. Like,
yeah,
it's so new.
Totally. It's so new. And I think because everything is so optimized these days. You know, you have all these apps that are telling you your baby's ideal schedule and do this and this then. And it's like, well, your baby's not a robot. This app doesn't know who your baby is. You know who your baby is. And I tell people all the time, your baby picked you to be their mom, not because they thought you would follow an app better than anyone else, but because they knew you would know them better. You would listen to them better. You would know what they need better than anyone else. That's why they picked you. You see these like sleep schedules too. And it's like, well, that's not your baby. That's just some random average baby. Like, but we get so focused on what people are saying your baby should be doing that we're not even looking at what our baby actually is doing. And and picking up on those cues. And, again, sure, somebody might like that swing, but your baby is their own person. Just like adults, we forget too, we put so much pressure on babies and expect babies to do things that adults would never do, or that, we completely allow adults to have their own likes and dislikes, but babies aren't allowed to. Babies are supposed to follow exactly what we think they should, or like what we think they should like, or I don't have a to the dot schedule. And if the time I'm supposed to go to bed rolls around and I'm not tired, I'm not going to let somebody force me to go to bed, but we're doing that to babies.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and I feel like it happens a lot with our first babies. I mean,
yes.
Hand up over here, I'm 100% guilty because you haven't done it before. But then you have more babies and you're like, I don't even have time for that. Like, even if I wanted to, like, this is not realistic. What the heck was I thinking the first time around? But it's true. Like, those first time moms, I love what you're doing. I love it because it is so important that women hear, like, you don't need all the stuff and you're the perfect mom for your baby. And it's okay to ignore everything and trust yourself. Like, that is where it's at. We don't do that enough. And I mean, even being in the community that we're in, right? Like, we run podcasts and we talk to women. And I hope that I am not one of those voices that you're hearing and like, oh my gosh, am I doing the checklist? It's like, this is good information. Take what you like, leave the rest.
Yes.
Like, this is it's just what it is, just like you're saying, so that when you do have the sundown scaries, or you do have, these emotions when you go to nurse and you have your letdown, that, oh, I've heard that before. Okay, I'm not crazy. Yeah. We can move on. It's not something you have to dwell on. It's the same thing. Like in my birth course, for example, we talk about cesarean birth, and I don't go super deep into it or anything like that, but we talk about, if this happens, here's what could happen. Here's a cesarean birth plan. Take what you like, leave the rest. And now you can file it away so you can focus on the good. And I think if we do that more as a community, then we can say, okay, these are all the things. And if it happens to me, I'm not crazy. But also, it's okay to just feel what I'm feeling right now. So
absolutely. And I tell people, when I'm doing birth plans, I'll say, we're going to go over this whole long list of things you could have a say on, things that could happen. And if at the end you decide, you know what, I want my birth list to be that whatever the doctor wants to do is what's going to happen. And I'm like, that to me, you might find a doula who's like, no, that's not okay. In my mind, I'm like, that's great, because you knew everything and then you made an informed choice.
Yes.
And that is what matters. And I think that speaks to postpartum too, of at least you're seeing everything. You're seeing all of the options. With sleep training, a lot of what you're seeing on Instagram is that you should sleep train, or here's how you sleep train, or all of that. So you don't think there's another option, which is not doing that, which is being responsive, which is safely co-sleeping, which is feeding your baby to sleep, all of that. You think there's only one way of doing things. I always say too, you know, I'm not a sleep account. I am vocal that I didn't sleep train, but I would never judge someone for that, because to me, all that matters is that you made that choice for yourself. You saw the information and you chose that, versus feeling like you had to do it, feeling like that was what was supposed to happen, feeling like if you didn't do that, you were going to ruin something. So that, I think, is, you know, in both birth and postpartum, is so important, of have the information and then make the choice of what's best for you. But none of these experts know what's best for you or your baby or your family. Only you do.
Right. Well, and then there's this underground, you know, part of us who are like, I totally slept with my baby. Yeah. And you know, I don't know. I think it's so funny because you get the like, you know, extremes on both sides, but it's like the majority of us are like, I hope this is okay, because I'm not getting out of bed right now. And here's one boob and I'm going to turn to the other side. And here's the other, like, you know, it's like I need sleep too.
When you're at a park or something and you're trying to suss out like, okay, does this other mom, does she sleep train? Or like if I mentioned that I brought the baby into
what's
bed.
safe to talk about.
Yeah. And then when they reveal that they too don't sleep train, you're like, oh my God, like it's amazing. But you're so scared to admit it at first because you think everybody does, but 100%.
Yeah, that's so funny. Okay, here's a question for you, because now you have had two, and you said, is your baby, you said you had him or her last year?
Her, my daughter.
Her. And so how old is she now?
She is 16 months. So second time baby. I have no idea how old she is. I have zero clue. Whereas with my son, I could have told you to the second how old he was. But I'm like, I don't know. She was born last year. She's whatever, over a year.
I love it. Okay. Well, you've done this twice now. So could you tell us a little bit about what you would have done differently with baby number one now that you've had baby number two?
Absolutely. So I really also think one of the biggest things that I try to talk about is how to be a first-time mom, but act or feel like a second-time mom. My first postpartum was basically like what we talked about. I listened to every expert. I was terrified to contact nap with my baby because people on Instagram had convinced me that that was a bad habit. I was obsessed with schedules. And it was horrible. Like, it was a horrible postpartum experience. I was miserable. I was so unhappy because I was so obsessed. And my son didn't want to do any of those things. So I was convinced there was something wrong with him. I was only seeing people, you know, following these schedules, sleeping through the night at 4 weeks. And it was very difficult. And I basically treated my second postpartum as like my redemption tour, where I knew better and I was going to do what I wanted to do. And it was night and day. And I'm so lucky I had that experience, but not everybody gets that experience to have a second postpartum where they can do things the way they wanted to do originally. With me, my biggest difference between my first postpartum and my second was my sleep anxiety had nothing to do with nighttime sleep. It was all naps. I was obsessed with naps because I didn't also understand developmentally normal infant sleep. So most babies, especially for naps, are going to hate the crib. Like, they don't want to be in the crib. They want you to hold them. That's how they want to sleep. That's normal. I didn't think that was normal because I was seeing sleep trainers with schedules telling me that I should be putting my baby down drowsy but awake, which I also think is like the greatest con of all time. Like, I don't know anybody who successfully does drowsy but awake, but you know, my son would nap in his crib for 20 minutes, normal. And then I would have to pick him up and hold him. But in my brain, that wasn't normal. That was wrong. He should be sleeping longer. Why is this happening to me? So through all of that, I finally learned about normal, developmentally normal infant sleep, especially around naps. And so for my second postpartum, I was like, we are doing this so differently. Yes, I think, especially because I had a child, I needed to help my daughter sleep in a crib. So I would do practice crib naps. I treated every time she slept in the crib as practice. Anything that she did in there was fantastic because, again, developmentally appropriate behavior is her wanting to sleep on me. So I was like, oh, you slept in the crib for 20 minutes? Wow, that's fantastic. Whereas with my first postpartum, I would have been rage texting my husband the whole time saying like, oh my God, this baby's only slept for 20 minutes. What's wrong with him? So I really leaned into embracing short naps, contact naps. I talked about this on my Instagram, but one of the greatest things I've ever done was get a Kindle so that I could read when I was nap trapped. I had in my brain with my son that I wasn't supposed to enjoy moments as much, like that I was supposed to be a martyr. I was supposed to suffer. That showed that I cared. That showed that I was a good mom. Whereas the second time around, I'm like, I'm sitting in this chair for 2 hours. Yeah, I'm going to read, and I'm going to read something fun that makes me happy. Or yeah, I'm doing a feed in the middle of the night. Of course, I'm going to put headphones in and listen to a funny podcast that makes me happy. Whereas before, I thought I had to be so like in it and obsessed with it and couldn't let myself have moments of joy. And the second time around, it was like, that's not good for anyone. Like, that's not good for my baby either. So reframing how I saw naps and then leaning into the contact naps. So wearing my baby for naps. And, a lot of people too will think, oh, I'm wearing the baby so I can get things done. No, no, no. The best way to wear your baby is to strap that baby to you and then sit on the couch. And then at least your hands are free so you can eat, you can change the channel like that. So I really leaned into that, and that truly changed my life of celebrating the contact naps, looking forward to them because I was rewarding myself with a book or a podcast or something. I think if you can learn about developmentally appropriate and normal infant sleep, that is one of the best things you can do for yourself, especially before you have a baby. Do not follow these, I won't say names, but there's like maybe a blonde sleep expert you might have seen on Instagram. You don't need to do anything she tells you. You can follow like one of my good friends on Instagram, Rachel at Hey Sleepy Baby. Follow accounts like that. Or if you are going to follow a sleep trainer account, also follow another account that isn't a sleep training account so you can see both sides. Or again, like we talked about, you might find that what works best for your family is somewhere in that gray. Maybe it's not doing everything the sleep trainer said, but maybe drowsy but awake does work for you and your family. But maybe then they still wake up after 20 minutes, but because you're following a sleep account that shows you normal sleep, you're realizing that's still great too. So you don't have to fall into like these camps. Let yourself figure out what works for you from the middle, but expose yourself to both sides if you want, or just not the sleep training side. Yeah, you don't want that one.
I love it. Okay, can we take a moment just before, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I did want to talk about just a little bit of like self-care for mom. So we talked a lot about, mental health and having your team around you and all that kind of prep, but how can mom take care of herself postpartum and not feel too guilty about that? And also understand that like taking care of ourselves is part of taking care of our children too. Absolutely.
I feel like also the idea of self-care for new moms has gotten kind of twisted too. Especially when you are freshly postpartum, I do think a shower to yourself is self-care. You'll see people on Instagram that are like, a shower is not self-care. That's a basic human need. And it's like, okay, sure, but let's meet moms where they actually are. And when you are a brand new mom who is nursing on demand, who has that emotional connection where they don't want to be away from their baby, where being away from their baby does cause extreme anxiety, then a shower is self-care. So you know what? Buy yourself a fancy shower gel that smells really good. Get a speaker for your shower so that you can't hear your baby crying, or you can't like hallucinate that your baby is crying, because that's also such a classic new mom experience. So get a shower, a speaker in the shower. Buy yourself a really nice luxury face lotion that feels good for you. Like, those things, that's okay if that is your self-care. The people that say like a shower isn't self-care, I get where they're coming from and that it's wanting more for moms, but that's also then setting up the mom that can't do anything more than a shower to, again, feel like she's doing something wrong, or feel like, wait, why can all of these moms go out and get their nails done or do these elaborate self-care routines, and I'm over here still wearing a diaper, feeling like I can't be away from my baby for more than 3 minutes? What's wrong with me? So instead, shower, amazing self-care, but make it a good shower. Like I said, make it a long one. Wash your, do an everything shower. Eat healthy foods, but also eat the foods that you want to eat. Like if you want a cupcake for breakfast, eat a cupcake for breakfast. Like give yourself permission to do all of those things. Do what you can. I think great self-care for new moms is just improve the moment that you're in small ways if you can. So nap trapped, get yourself a Kindle. If your baby is screaming or crying, you also don't have to take that all in. Like get headphones that are noise canceling headphones, or put in a podcast again that you like that makes you feel happy. Improve that moment if you can. That's amazing self-care. I think for me too, it's self-care for me, especially with my second, was finding things that reminded me that I am an individual person and not just a mom. And for me, that was really, this isn't a Kindle advertisement. I would love if Kindle sponsored me. But for me, that was realizing, a huge piece of who I am is I love to read. And with my son, I didn't read at all because, there's a baby in the room with me and I didn't want a book light on, or, I thought I had to be miserable during nap traps. Realizing I can read connected me with a piece of me so quickly in this second postpartum that felt like huge self-care for me. So to me, self-care for new moms is whatever makes you happy, not what somebody is telling you that you should be doing. It's whatever feels good to you. Maybe it is for 5 minutes, just going for a walk around the block without the baby. Maybe it's going to Target. Like Target is the number one safe space for brand new moms, I feel like. Like go to Target and buy yourself something, and also understand it's okay if you don't want to be away from your baby. I also had an experience with my son where somebody was telling me, you need to go out. You need to fill your cup. It will make you a better mom. I did not want to be away from my baby. I didn't. And I think that's okay also. I don't think that meant I had some, overlying or underlying anxiety issue or anything like that. It was, of course I want to be, that's a biological from when we were cavemen feeling like, of course I want to be near my baby. And so if that feels too hard for you, then again, focus on self-care in your little bubble. Watch a postpartum show. Postpartum is the best time to couch rot and catch up on shows. So find it. I would talk about watching TV and people would be like, oh my God, I saw somewhere on Instagram that your baby shouldn't even have a TV on within 5 feet of them because they might watch it. And I'm like, oh my God, we have lost the plot, guys. That is so insane. And also the best part of postpartum is, especially when your baby is still a brand new baby and isn't doing much at all, the best thing to do is just sit on the couch for hours and watch Top Chef for 30 hours in a row. So things like that, I think also can be self-care. And then again, asking for help when you need help, being vocal about that. I also find for me, self-care was just vocalizing what I was experiencing out loud versus holding it in. So even just saying to my husband, oh, I'm experiencing that weird 4 p.m. anxiety again, and saying that out loud so somebody else could validate it and just say oh gosh, I'm so sorry, but remember that it happened yesterday and it ended and went away too. That is self-care. So I think it's really just kind of, redefining what self-care is to you, and don't feel bad about whatever that may be. So if it's an 8 a.m. brownie and then a nice shower where you lather on some fancy lotion after and maybe cry a little bit too, that's self-care in my book.
Oh, that's perfect. I love it. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for what you're doing online and also here on the podcast. I was super excited to have you here with me today. Before we jump off, can you tell everybody how they can connect with you?
Yes. Well, also, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This was amazing. I feel like I basically talked the entire time. So apologies if that was too much. But
that's the point.
Okay, good. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for having me. You can find me on Instagram at Wilder Beginnings. That is my Instagram account. I have a website, wilderbeginnings.com. I don't really know what's on my website. I haven't looked in a while. So I would say just come hang with me on Instagram. I tried to do TikTok, but I'm a millennial and it really scared me. And I did not understand what was happening there. So I immediately got off. So I think my TikTok account is still up, but I do not go on there. So Wilder Beginnings on Instagram, the best place to find me. I have my podcast, On We Go, which I describe as the podcast with no point, but like a voice note from your best friend with no pressure to respond. It's perfect for when you're doing laundry or, it's like sometimes we just don't want silence. And instead you just want someone kind of like talking nonsense to you. And that's my podcast. So you can find me there. And then I also randomly, I have a merch shirt store called the Bad Moms and Babies Club, which kind of was born from this idea of how much I loved doing all of the things that people told me were bad, like contact napping, feeding to sleep. And when people ask, oh, is it your baby a good baby? They're asking, does your baby sleep through the night? So I really leaned into this idea of I'm a bad mom and my baby's a bad baby. And so it's a whole thing. It's really cute. People love it. So shirts there too. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
That's awesome. And we'll make sure to include that in the show notes for everybody listening and on the email list if you guys are on there. But thank you again. That was so fun.
Yeah, thank you. I had so much fun. It was so great talking with you.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.